A reading from the Acts of the Apostles. After Paul and Barnabas had proclaimed the good news to that city and made a considerable number of disciples, they returned to Lystra and to Iconium and to Antioch. They strengthened the spirits of the disciples and exhorted them to persevere in the faith, saying, "It is necessary for us to undergo many hardships to enter the kingdom of God." They appointed elders for them in each church, and with prayer and fasting commended them to the Lord, in whom they had put their faith. Then they traveled through Pisidia and reached Pamphylia. After proclaiming the word at Perga, they went down to Italia. From there they sailed to Antioch, where they had been commended to the grace of God for the work they had now accomplished. When they arrived, they called the church together and reported what God had done with them and how he had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. At the end of my novitiate year, we had the opportunity to spend some time at the Western Provinces Retreat Center up in Oregon. We had lots of time there to relax and to read. In 1 week, my classmates and I decided that we were going to go for a hike. So we pulled out some maps and we looked at different routes. And we picked one that would go up through this valley, and we would arrive at this big lake where we could have lunch and go swimming. And then we could come back down and we'd get to the car and go home. Well, we got there, and unbeknownst to us the year before, this big forest fire had come down through the valley, and it burned a lot of the forest. And so we got there, we planned this, so we decided we were going to take the hike anyway. And so as we're walking up, I was really struck by the different ways the fire had affected the terrain. Some places were perfectly normal, like the fire hadn't even come. The trees were still standing tall, the grass, the underbrush was still growing there. Other areas, the fire had come through really fast, and it must have been very hot, because it melted the sap, and the bark fell right off of the trees, leaving them exposed to insects, to disease. Some of them, while still standing, began to die. Some had fallen over. Other areas of this hike, the trees had been burned completely and had already fallen over, so as we're walking, we had to step over different ones and that sort of thing. But what struck me the most as we continued was we reached areas that were completely consumed by the fire, and all that was left there was burnt dirt and ash. And so as we're walking, I was looking at this one area, there was nothing there, just black and dirt and that sort of thing. But I was looking off in the distance, and not too far from where we were walking, this one little weed had grown up, and it kind of looked like this one on the bottom of our crucifix. It was green, and it had just a red flower on it, very simple. I don't think I probably would have noticed it if the fire hadn't come through and burned everything, because I mean, it really wasn't very striking, but because of the contrast between the black ash, this plant really stood out to me. Paul and Barnabas said that we would need to undergo many hardships in order to enter the kingdom. When I was thinking about this, and this idea of the weed growing from the ashes came to mind, it really underscored for me the necessity of the cross in order to reach new life. That first we have to undergo hardship, the cross, in order to come to the resurrection. Each of us, especially in these past few weeks with things in our nation, things here in our own community, each of us will bear our own wounds, will bear our own scars and our hurts in different ways, perhaps like the different ways that the fire affected the terrain on this hike. But what I think is important is, like that burnt area where the new growth came forth, we have to let these hurts, these pains, bring forth new life, new growth in us. About a month ago, we had the relics of Mary Magdalene here in the chapel with us. And I had some time to stop and pray. And I was reflecting on the readings from Easter Sunday morning about Mary Magdalene there going to the tomb, how she was filled with anxiety and doubt and fear. And she went to the tomb from her brokenness to seek out Jesus. And it was there, in the midst of her struggle and her despair, that she encountered the risen Lord, that she encountered Christ. However, she didn't just stop there with the encounter. She went and she shared it with those that she loved. She went to Peter and John, the other disciples, and she proclaimed to them the new life that she had experienced, the new life that she had seen. And Peter and John and James were able to come and see the tomb and experience this resurrection as well. And they went out and preached it. I think what's important for us in the middle of these hardships, after we've experienced the cross, is to be able to also embrace the resurrection, to embrace the new life, to let the growth come from us, to bear our hardships and let them bring forth life in us, and also to go out then and share them with others.